Okay, we've all been there, right? You spend months, maybe even years, working on something absolutely crucial, something foundational. And then you have to watch someone else get all the glory for some flashy project that's literally built on top of your hard work. It's just a super frustrating, familiar feeling. But today, we're going to reframe that. We're going to flip it on its head. Oof, this quote, it hits hard, doesn't it? It's that feeling of pouring your absolute soul into something essential, something you know matters, only for it to go, well, completely unnoticed. And you know what? This single thought right here is the exact moment where so many brilliant builders, engineers, and creators just decide to give up. But what if that silence, that invisibility, what if it isn't a weakness at all? What if it's actually your superpower? Yeah, the very source of its immense power and scale. Let's dive into that. Let's explore how the most impactful work so often happens way, way far from the spotlight. All right, so to really get this, let me introduce you to Sarah Chen. Picture this, it's 3:47 in the morning. She's just spent 6 grueling months writing code, wrestling with 3 failed deployments, and for all that effort, she's received zero recognition, zilch. And then, in a meeting that very day, her manager stands up and praises a colleague for some shiny new feature, a feature that, you guessed it, only exists because of the rock-solid foundation that Sarah built. She just closes her laptop. She's done. She's ready to quit. And here's the thing. Sarah is so far from alone. Right now, there are an estimated 47 million people out there just like her. They're the ones building the absolutely essential things that nobody ever sees. They're refactoring that ancient legacy code, they're training models that are months away from seeing the light of day, and they're writing the documentation that prevents disasters. Disasters that, because of them, never even happen. Okay, so this isn't just a vibe, right? It's not just a feeling people have. This is backed by some serious data. A 2024 study from MIT, they looked at 12,000 software engineers and found this absolutely shocking disconnect. The most valuable people, the real MVPs, they weren't the ones launching the flashy features. Nope. They were the ones building infrastructure deep in the guts of the system, debugging, optimizing, basically making everyone else 10 times faster while staying completely invisible. So, get this, $4.2 million. That number represents a catastrophic event that never happened. One single engineer in the study, all by himself, prevented a data breach that would have cost his company $4.2 million. And his reward? Crickets. Nothing. Nobody in the company even knew his name. And it doesn't stop there. Here's another one. An engineer went in, optimized some server processes, and ended up saving her company $180,000. And that's not a one-time thing. That's every single year. A direct, totally measurable impact on the bottom line. And yet, passed over for promotion, time and time again. Okay, and this one is just incredible. A third engineer rewrote a company's entire core authentication system from scratch, from the ground up. This completely invisible work became the absolute bedrock for 50 other products that all launched to massive fanfare. And the punchline? He wasn't even invited to the company all-hands meeting where they celebrated all those launches. And that really sums it up, doesn't it? It's the core feeling for anyone doing that foundational work. You spend years doing all the heavy lifting, building this massive, incredible pyramid, only for someone else to waltz in, place the final tiny stone on top, and take all the credit. But here's the twist. Here's the thing that the people chasing that short-term praise just don't get about silent progress. It compounds. Let me tell you the story of Marcus, a researcher over at the AI company Anthropic. So, back in January 2023, he started on 4 months of really deep, totally invisible work on safety layers. And this timeline, oh man, it just illustrates the difference so perfectly. While Marcus was grinding away, totally in the background, a colleague launches this flashy chatbot demo, and boom, instant fame. We're talking speaking gigs, interviews, the whole 9 yards. But just look at the timeline. That flashy demo, it was a flash in the pan, shut down in 6 months. Fast forward a year and a half later, Claude 3.5 launches, and it's built directly on Marcus's foundational safety work. And today, his invisible code processes 100 million conversations every single month, protecting users he will never, ever meet. That is compounding impact. So that begs the question, right? If your impact isn't visible, how in the world do you measure it? Well, let's head over to a small team at Google DeepMind and see how they figured this out. In 2024, they took on this really unsexy project, They decided to rebuild their entire evaluation framework. The system that actually tells them if their AI models are getting better or not. And here's the genius move. They completely stopped trying to measure their work by how visible it was. Instead, they focused on something they called the cascade effect. And this is the key idea right here. It's when a single foundational improvement triggers a massive chain reaction of positive outcomes across the entire system. And just look at this cascade in action. Their invisible work, building better evaluation systems, well, that led to them building better, more accurate models. Okay, makes sense. Then, those better models enabled more reliable applications. And because those applications were so reliable, doctors actually started trusting them for diagnostics. And that trust, that ultimately led to saving human lives. Think about that. Their names were never in the headlines, but they knew. They knew the exact path their impact took. Which brings us right back to Sarah Chen. Remember her? So the morning after she almost quit, she decided to try and find her own cascade effect. She logged into GitHub, honestly not sure what, if anything, she was going to find.
So the first thing she sees is just the raw output, 472 pull requests in 6 months. I mean, that's a huge amount of work, right? But it's still just a measure of effort, not impact. So she kept digging.
And then she found it, the first layer of the cascade. She saw that 127 other developers had built their own features directly on top of her foundational code. Suddenly, she realized her work wasn't a dead end. It was a starting point for hundreds of other people. And here is the absolutely breathtaking result. Those 127 developers, using her foundation, went on to build products and features that ultimately reached 4.2 million users. That was her true impact. No, it wasn't direct, but my God, it was massive. In that single moment, everything changed. She finally realized she wasn't just building in silence. She was building the very ground that everyone else was standing on. That silence, it wasn't empty. It was crackling with potential energy. And Sarah's story isn't just an isolated incident. It's actually part of a much larger, quieter revolution that's happening right now. The most forward-thinking companies are finally starting to get it. They're realizing that the most valuable work isn't always the most visible work. This is basically how they've started to see progress. They finally realized that the visible 10%, all the flashy product launches and big announcements, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It is entirely 100% dependent on the invisible 90% of foundational work that's holding the whole thing up. And because of this shift, we're starting to see these really cool new forms of recognition emerge. So Anthropic, they've created Foundation Contributor Awards. Google has launched Cascade Impact Bonuses, specifically for work that multiplies the productivity of others. And OpenAI has infrastructure heroes to recognize the people who prevent those catastrophic failures we talked about. The metrics, they are finally starting to change. So look, if you are one of these silent builders, if you're listening to this and it resonates with you, the key takeaway is this. You are not falling behind. You are not failing. You are building the very foundation of the future that everyone else will eventually stand on. Your work matters so much more than you probably know. So let's end with this question. I want you to really think about your own work, the projects you pour your energy into that maybe no one ever sees. What is the invisible foundation that you are building today? Because that silence you're working in, well, that might just be the sound of the future being built.